So good evening, everyone, and so welcome to our 7th World Wetlands Day celebration here at University of Waterloo. Particularly welcome to those who didn't join us for the afternoon session, where I also gave a little bit of historical overview of this celebration here at Waterloo. It's actually the 7th annual World Wetlands Day celebration that we're doing here at Waterloo. It's also our 5th distinguished public lecture as part of this celebration. And so, as you probably have, or whether you know it or not, this year's theme of the Ramsar World Wetlands Day celebrations is Wetlands and Climate. And so, of course, of great importance in that respect, or for this theme, is, of course, the role of peatlands in climate. And so it's, of course, a great pleasure to have Dianna Kopanski here then as our distinguished lecturer, because she is actually the coordinator of the Global Peatlands Initiative in the United Nations RED program. And the RED program, R-E-D-D, stands for the United Nations Collaborative Program on Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. And as we all learn in kindergarten, deforestation is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere. But if you look at some of the earlier estimations of the contribution of deforestation and forest degradation to greenhouse gas emissions, typically what was accounted for is the above ground biomass burning and its contributions to CO2 emissions. But what is also clear, particularly we saw a lot of talks this afternoon on fires in peatlands. What also happens, of course, during forest fires, forests that are growing on peatlands, of course, you also burn a lot of the below ground carbon, which of course leads also to CO2 emissions. So in that respect, it's actually nice to have the person here who actually also looks at deforestation within the context of peatlands. So Dianna Kopanski is working at the Freshwater Land and Climate Branch of the United Nations Environment, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. She's an expert in landscapes and biodiversity, and she delivers a suite of ecosystem management and climate change programs to contribute to the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Dianna has worked in Africa for the past 18 years on a variety of issues within emergency, humanitarian, and development fields. For UN Environment, she works globally, and she has led teams to develop and implement many different projects in the general areas of environment and climate change. While working with the Executive Office of the United Nations, she developed UN system-wide strategies, policies to strengthen the regional offices, and her work has enabled the inclusion of environment as a pillar in the United Nations Development Assistance Frameworks. Working in the Horn of Africa and the African Great Lakes regions, she has led the environmental portfolio for UNFAO's Regional Emergency Office in Africa. While with UNDP's Dryland Development Center, Dianna has provided direct technical support to governments in over 40 countries to integrate environmental issues into national development plans and poverty reduction strategies. And she has developed a new area of work on dryland biodiversity. Prior to coming to Africa, Dianna worked for the Canadian government, preparing their State of Environment reports. And she was part of the team that undertook a groundbreaking study developing a decision support system known as the illness cost of air pollution. And the results of the study enabled the Ontario and Canadian governments to dramatically improve air quality by lowering allowable pollutant levels. Dianna holds a Master's of Environmental Studies from York University and a Bachelor's of Science honors degree in Conservation Biology and Ecology from Queen's University in Canada. So please join me in welcoming Dianna tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Dianna Kopanski, and I work for UN Environment, and I'm here to talk to you about peatlands, why they matter to the climate, people, and the planet. And you must know that they're natural sponges, that they're water purifiers, they're buffers and carbon sinks. And they prepare us for the impacts of climate change. And in case you were wondering, all peatlands are wetlands, but not all wetlands are peatlands. So we're here today to celebrate the World Wetlands Day It's usually celebrated on the 2nd of February, but my flight wouldn't arrive in time, and you guys were also really busy last week. So we've made an exception, and I think Monday's a great day to start. This day is highlighting the issue of wetlands and their role in climate change. And I really believe that if we can change the way we look at wetlands and how we interact with them, that we can take the necessary action to actually fight climate change. Wetlands provide us with drinking water. They naturally absorb carbon. They reduce flooding. They relieve droughts. They help reduce storm surges and protect our coastlines. And wetlands are host to many migratory species and home to many others. So last week, I hear that you might have felt a little bit of a tickle of the polar vortex. and you've likely heard that our climate change situation is very urgent. Climate scientists have said that we are at the tipping point of a runaway climate change, uncontrollable. And in October last year, a group of global experts on the International Panel of Climate Change warned decision makers of the dangers of allowing the Earth to warm more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. They say storms will get more fierce and happen more often, that coastal cities will be flooded and lands will be lost, that our lives on the planet will change significantly, and that the precious animals and plants that we so deeply depend on are at risk. I'm here to tell you that peatlands matter for the planet. Scientists say that it's time to act, that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is possible, but we need to make unprecedented changes now. And we need to look everywhere for solutions. Alongside these emission reductions, consumption changes, habits, the panel also urged that actions that can remove carbon from the atmosphere should be sped up in the next few years, which actually might be the most important years of our time. Some of you may be asking yourselves why I came here and took an entire global flight to get here. I do believe that Philip and his tremendous students from University of Waterloo invited me here to tell you a little bit about this special thing called the peatland. It's a jam-packed powerhouse of an ecosystem. It's underappreciated, it's undervalued, and it's the underdog. But honestly, I think it's the dark horse. It's one which I believe is so important for our climate future that I did come here. I jumped on a plane, 2 flights, and more than 24 hours to talk to you about this dark horse. It's a treasure called our peatlands. And here are a few reasons why they matter to the planet. Peatlands are a type of wetland that occur in more than 180 countries of the world, simply defined as land with peat, although there is no globally accepted standard of how much organic material peat should contain and how thick the layer must be to call it a peatland. This is also why they're not yet accurately or fully mapped, but they're estimated to cover only 3% of our land surface, while they store twice as much carbon as the entire world's forests. These are powerful carbon sinks, and they are the largest long-term store of any terrestrial ecosystem. This is a picture of a pristine peatland doing its job of storing carbon in the Congo Basin. The picture was taken from space, and it was shared with me by Dr. Roberta Bondar, Canada's first female astronaut. She generously sourced these images for us from NASA. Peatlands matter for the climate. And unlike healthy peatlands that store carbon, this is a picture of a drained peatland. It's been converted and it's emitting carbon. It's an aerial view over a drainage canal in the center of a palm oil plantation that stretches as far as your eyes can see in Indonesia. This peatland, having been deforested, drained, and planted with palm oil, is emitting enormous amounts of greenhouse gas. In fact, current greenhouse gas emissions from drained peatlands are estimated to be 5% of all emissions caused by human activity. That's 5%, or close to 2 gigatons of carbon, CO2 per year. If they're burning, that proportion can double and go up to 10%. Overexploited and damaged by actions such as drainage, agricultural conversion, infrastructure development, oil, gas, and mining for fuel, parts of the world are feeling the impacts and pressure to reduce emissions from their peatlands. New maps are emerging, and our global initiative is working on pulling these maps together to give a more updated and relevant global peatland picture. This one from 2009 shows peatland carbon emissions and highlights that Indonesia has the most emissions from degraded peatlands in the world, estimated at 500 metric tons of CO2 per acre. Russia is a second at 160 metric tons of CO2 per acre, and USA in a third at over 66 metric tons for CO2 per acre. And with many of their peatlands degraded, deforested, drained, and converted to forest plantations, palm oil, Indonesia is aware of their massive emissions from degraded peatlands. And they're one of the few countries in the world that count these emissions for reductions under the UN Framework for Convention on Climate Change. Indonesia has over 15 million hectares of peatlands, but since the 60s, with the transmigration of people from the mainland to Kalimantan and Sumatran Islands, it has resulted in the opening up of peatlands for logging, forest plantations, and agricultural industry. And now, almost half of Indonesia's peatlands have been degraded. The consequence of a lack of knowledge of the impacts of draining peatlands on large scale, combined with the dry season, the tropical dry seasons, and slash and burn agriculture, has led to a series of catastrophic fires across Indonesia. Degraded peatlands are prone to fires, which are really hard to put out. They're also extremely hard to detect. And you may not know, but peat is a fuel. It burns, and it burns deep. It can burn undetected underground for months, even after rain and even after snowfall. And this is exactly what happened to Indonesia in 2015, when thousands of fires across the country burned out of control. At one point, there were 127,000 fires actively burning. And these fires were the worst on the record, and estimated to have released about 1.5 to 1.75 gigatons of CO2 emissions into the air, just from the fires alone. So to help us wrap our minds around that scale, this amount is more than the entire total annual emissions from Japan for that same year. And on the worst fire days in Indonesia, they tallied up more emissions in a single day of fires than the entire daily emissions from the US economy when it was fully functioning, not shut down as it is. So a full strength US economy one day of peatland fires in Indonesia. 6 provinces declared a state of emergency in 2015, and more than 43 million Indonesians were affected with the smoke and toxic haze. 500,000 of them were treated for respiratory illnesses related to air pollution. And it was, in my view, underestimated by the World Bank to have cost over $16 million as the fires also impacted the economies of the neighboring countries and even shut down the airspace. The Indonesian government took swift action to abate the disaster, and ever since they've been taking groundbreaking steps to build an environmental strategy for peatland protection, restoration, both globally and locally. And their measures include putting in place a peatlands moratorium, combined with complementary policy and regulatory frameworks for peatlands management. They work to establish institutions and activate communities. Some slash and burn farmers that had actually been the source of some of these fires have been converted and trained into community firefighters and detectors. And they're traveling around educating all their fellow Indonesians about the impacts of peat fires, how to operate on them, and what not to do. And in 2016, the President Joko Widodo from Indonesia extended the peatland moratoria from the conversion of primary forest to peatlands to cover all of Indonesia's peatlands. This means that every single industrial-scale forestry palm oil plantation in Indonesia in 2016 had an executive order to re-wet their peatlands urgently. Alongside this, they established the Peatlands Restoration Agency called Badan Restorasi Gambut, and they've been tasked to organize the re-wetting of over 2 million hectares of degraded peatlands. That's a huge task. But so far, Indonesia has succeeded in re-wetting more peatlands in 5 years than the entire European group has in a decade. Indonesia is working hard to reduce their own emissions from peatlands, but success for emissions reduction on a global scale requires global action. Bringing together international organizations working on peatlands, the UN Environment established the Global Peatlands Initiative. We founded it with 13 founding members at the UNFCCC COP in Marrakesh at the end of 2016. And since then, the initiative has grown to 28 different organizations with 4 major tropical peatland countries: Indonesia, Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Peru. And they've come together to work urgently to improve the conservation, restoration, and management of peatlands locally in their countries and globally. And I have the privilege of coordinating it. The Global Peatlands Initiative aims to help people build an understanding of the rates, drivers, and pathways of peatland ecosystem change. We work with countries to help them to make well-informed decisions and to develop management and policy options that minimize impact on people and the environment and avoid dangerous social and environmental climatic tipping points linked to peatlands loss, degradation, and burning. And as a first step in filling the information gap, the initiative launched in November 2017, Smoke on Water. I hope that title sings to many of you. It was really purposely selected because what I think we really need to do as scientists, as governments, as communities, is to speak to people. What does that come to your mind when you hear Smoke on Water? Well, Smoke on Water is a report, it's a rapid response assessment to counter global threats from peatland loss and degradation. It's not perfect science, but it is a compelling policy piece put together with contributions of 30 different experts from 15 different organizations across the globe. And I'll just share with you a quick video that highlights the findings of the report. That report gives about 8 major recommendations, and we put that out before we got the science right so that we could get the attention of the global community on peatlands and the issues that we're facing. So the first thing was that the partnership wants to get to know peatlands, to have people know peatlands, to know where they are and how they're changing. The second main area of work of the partnership is to look at productive uses, piloting new technologies for wet agriculture, Peluda culture, and looking at real, viable, drainage-free livelihoods. We're working with countries to develop policies, laws, institutional frameworks, ways of litigation against when companies violate regulations and moratoria. And we're also looking at financial solutions and instruments. For example, in Indonesia, UN Environment worked with BNP Paribas, which is a private bank, and put in together with the public institutions, the government, and created a fund, $1 billion fund for protection of forests. We worked with Michelin on the first deal, and there is now a protective rubber ring around an enormous forest that has vital peatlands. So there are ways that we can be innovative and look at financing options. But the first big piece of work is to know where the peatlands are. And according to the Global Peatlands CO2 maps, Canada has been identified with the largest carbon stocks at 155,000 metric tons of carbon. Russia's second at 138,000, and Indonesia, despite its small size, is in easy third place at 54,000 metric tons of carbon. And with so many different names for peatlands, from bogs to tubières, to fens and mires, to forested swamps, and given their diversity, I'm sure you've seen them before. Maybe you didn't even realize it. Here are some pictures from Uganda, Cuba, Colombia, Argentina, and very recent pictures from North Korea. There are peatlands in Belarus, in Georgia, in the Republic of Congo, in Siberia. And this peatland is called Burns Bog. It's a rain-fed peatland located in British Columbia. It's the largest raised peat bog and the largest undeveloped urban landmass on the west coast of the Americas. But maybe you've heard about it because it was in 2016, it was on fire. With so little known about these unique ecosystems, it's not surprising that in 2017, an international team of scientists mapped the world's largest contiguous tropical peatland in the Cuvette Centrale of the Congo Basin. It contains around 30 gigatons of carbon, which is as much as the US economy emits in 20 to 15 years. The Cuvette Centrale peatlands in the Congo Basin are a complex of 145,500 kilometers squared, and that's about the size of England. These peatlands cover only 5.4% of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo, but they store as much carbon in their vegetation as the entire forests of both of those countries. Called the second lungs of the world after the Amazon rainforest, this place is home to some of the rarest, most endangered biodiversity. It boasts more than 10,000 different species of tropical plants. It's home to forest elephants, chimpanzees. It's the only place in the world in DR Congo that has bonobos, and it's got the largest western lowland gorilla population and also has mountain gorillas. Currently intact and near pristine, but we're really urgently working to help those countries protect it. And following its discovery, the two countries agreed to collaborate and establish most of the Cuvette Centrale peatland as an international and one of the largest transboundary Ramsar site in the world, 129,000 kilometers squared. Here we zoom into a map of these Congo Basin peatlands. We want to protect them, but there are many challenges facing us. As shown in this map, most of the Cuvette Centrale peatlands are already covered by proposed or current concessions for logging, mining, oil and gas exploitation and exploration. And there's plans to have an extensive road network which connects western Congo to eastern Congo, which is proposed to go actually right across part of this peatland. The problem with creating these road networks is then you have not just the disruption of that straight line and the hydrology, but then there's access. We're really privileged to have had that this peatland has not really been accessed. And you'll see probably about 10 slides, 10 pictures probably in the world of this peatland. So it's so remote and protected because of the conflict situation in that country. But we know those threats. They're agricultural expansion, peatland drainage, and as a result, overall ecosystem degradation. This could also possibly disrupt the entire hydrology of the Congo Basin, including the mighty Congo River. In March 2018, the Global Peatlands Initiative partners met in Brazzaville, Republic of Congo. We wanted to support these two countries after this finding, to work together and try to find solutions that would ensure this pristine peatland is intact, it stays wet, and the carbon locked in. And urged on by the sharing of experiences and hard-taught lessons of Indonesia. We have the Indonesian minister in there. The Republic of Congo minister, the female minister there, Arlette Soudan Nuno, as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo previous minister from Environment and Sustainable Development. And that is my former boss, Executive Director of UN Environment. They're celebrating because after 3 days of working together, talking together, and negotiating, they signed a groundbreaking declaration which commits these countries to work together to protect and sustainably manage this Cuvette Centrale peatlands. UN Environment and the Global Peatlands Initiative partners have also committed to share lessons, to help exchange technologies and to find best science to inform approaches on peatlands conservation, restoration, and sustainable management. And I have another little video of someone that was really integral in this discussion and really supported it. You might recognize her, but in case, she lets you know who she is.
Hi, I'm Dr. Roberta Bonder. I was an international astronaut and Canada's first female astronaut when I performed experiments on the Space Shuttle Discovery on the first international microgravity laboratory mission. It was my privilege to see the beautiful Earth from space, which really made me passionate about actions that we can take to strive to protect it. And that is why it is my great honor to support Global Peatlands Initiative and their efforts to save our peatlands from degradation worldwide, to protect the rare and unique biodiversity which they house, and to preserve locked organic carbon and prevent them from being emitted into the atmosphere. I try to capture my passion for the environment in my photography of the natural world. It's through these kinds of images that we can see things like peatlands, for example, what they were like in the past, make comparisons to the present, look at changes, impacts that we have had as human beings, and use those to support sound decision-making that will drive policy to protect them. The Cuvette Centrale peatland is of global significance. It is the largest transboundary peatland in the Congo Basin and is a lifeline for people who live there. I commend you for your commitment to work together to understand and protect this global treasure, to ensure that the Earth is a good place to live and remains beautiful for all generations.
I actually still can't figure out if that's an animated butterfly or is it just so incredible that a butterfly just swiped across Roberta Bondar
Hi, I'm Dr.
As she gave us that message. She's a remarkable person, and what she really taught me when I had a chance to speak with her is perspective. When you get out of your microcosm of daily habit and routine and to the supermarket, to the school, to the work, to the this, and you are seeing this amazing place from space. She said it changed her life. She has multiple PhDs. She studied, she taught. She actually went to space for an entirely different reason, to look at the effects of space on the brain. And when she got there, she really felt like a speck. And she came back to Canada and to the Earth with a message. And if you haven't seen her work, it's quite remarkable and inspiring. So I think I just wanted to thank Roberta Bondar for all her work and her inspiration. Because really, peatlands, they matter for people. Let's not forget it. In addition to the role they play in climate change mitigation and adaptation, they capture carbon, but they also contributing to biodiversity conservation, water regime and the water we drink, water quality, and they provide ecosystem services that support livelihoods and economic, social, and cultural activities. And these are the peatlands of the Mongolian steppe. Many Indonesian communities have been depending on peatlands and managing them for centuries, harvesting fish, fruits, and building materials that live there naturally. People have inhabited the Congo Basin for more than 50,000 years, and today's population of 75 million people depend on it for food, fresh water, and shelter. There are nearly 150 distinct ethnic groups in the region, in the Congos, and they also continue their hunter-gatherer lifestyles. And this is where I'd like to introduce you to Peru. Peru is one of our key peatland countries. They have a vast complex of tropical peatlands, from the high-altitude peatlands and that provide grazing grounds for alpaca, to the lowland peatlands that stretch far across Amazonia, supporting 9 different indigenous communities that live there. It's estimated that approximately 5,000 indigenous families depend on the fruit from a single tree, the aguafa. And these power fruit, highly rich in vitamin C. It might not be on your shelves yet, but telling you that the Peruvian Amazon is rich naturally. So Peru lowlands, the peatlands cover approximately 120,000 kilometers. And Peru has 1 foot in Indonesian's reality as well. It contains 5,500 kilometers square of highland peatlands, are quite degraded. They're emitting and quite often on fire. But the lowland Amazonia peatlands are the foot in Congo reality. So they're bridging both realities of these 4 peatland countries we're working with. And that lowland peatland is estimated to contain 20 billion tons of carbon. It's rich in biodiversity. And Peru's government has been taking steps. I think you must recognize the Indonesian minister there. She's really getting the word out about the challenges and the steps and measures that they've taken. She doesn't want that to happen somewhere else. And so we all know that developmental changes and choices must be made. We need to really make sure that we involve the local community and local governments, subnational governments. They're the ones that are on the ground doing the work. And we need to bring other ministers together beyond the environmental ministers. And we really, really need to speak to you, to the scientists. For Peru, there will be an important focus as well on developing financial instruments and markets. This is the guape fruit, by the way. And apparently, people that have had it say actually it's going to be like the next Red Bull. It tastes amazing, though. I don't know if you've had Red Bull, but apparently it tastes much better. Toward the end of the year, we'll be meeting actually in Peru as the Global Peatlands Initiative. And if anyone has anything groundbreaking to share, we're also very open to that. Because scientific research has been and will always be an extremely part of the work that informs the work of the Global Peatlands Initiative. UN Environment actually has the responsibility to bring the best science to inform policies, both nationally and globally. And it was the research community that alerted us to the treasures in the Congos. And it is the science that helps us point to peatlands as a good spot for urgent climate action. We've worked pretty hard to bring science to policy in a way that our collective voice are heard and our messages are combined and not conflicting. They are combined for a high impact. We value peatlands research as it's vital for good decision making, and it's a priority for the initiative to bring global attention to the best available science and connect policymakers with the best researchers. And that's why we have also been creating a network of peatland scientists around the world. And in October, we helped the countries launch the International Tropical Peatland Center. It's in Bogor, Indonesia. The center will be an instrumental hub for peatlands research globally. It's committed to demand-driven collaborative research, outreach and technology transfer between regions, nations, and international partners. And the center's launch is also a trailblazing step to bridge the gap between science and policy on tropical peatlands. And commitments from universities are coming in to bolster up the center and ensure that research and science done on tropical peatlands is collaborative, relevant, streamlined, and impactful, and transferable to other parts of the world. So we're looking for partners that would like to participate in the center through research programs, fellowships, PhD students, transfers, field study trips to these peatland countries. The center's launch was part of the working week where the Minister of the Republic of Congo and representatives from the Democratic Republic of Congo and the international scientists came together with private sector and local communities to exchange ideas. These exchange trips have been game changers, and when people meet and share their experiences, then action can be accelerated. Exchanges on policies, private conversations about litigation, how to work with the private sector, how to set up social community and community social forestry and fire prevention and protection, and management, restoration, and conservation. South-South cooperation is key. And the minister, actually, of Environment of the Republic of Congo here is being taught by our Indonesian experts how to fight a fire. That's an on-ground fire. It's on a peatland. And they've also developed remarkable technology for actually getting deep into the peat. So if anyone needs to know some new technology, fast, effective, and accessible at the local level, this is where you go. I also came here to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. This is one of our flagship UN Environment publications. It'll be launched in March, and it's a Frontiers publication. It's about the emerging issues of environmental concern for the next 10 to 20 years. This is forecasting far into the future. The publication is a collection of the top 6 emerging issues of our time, and the topics are voted on by countries, leading scientists, and you might not be surprised, but there's a chapter on peatlands. And we just managed to sneak in a chapter on permafrost peatlands. I think that there's a lot of knowledge and understanding or attention to global issues in the tropics, but now it's time to open our eyes here to the global north. So we've done a sneak peek. Permafrost thawing is seen as one of the most important tipping elements, which may steer our world into an uncontrollable hothouse. And you should know with confidence, having spoken to many of you, that the students here are looking already into these issues, and you're ahead of the curve. So we're really looking forward to your research outcomes so that we can work together to make the change and pull out the best possible outcomes for the planet. May still be shocked about the statistics and the information that I shared about Indonesian fires, but this summer there was a fire in Germany, uncontrollable. And peat fires were burning throughout the winter from 2010 to 2011 in Russia under a blanket of snow. Canada has the second largest peat area, 1.1 million kilometers squared, and it's said to have the largest peat carbon stock with pretty accurate number given that we haven't quite mapped them accurately. But that's quite huge. We also have 37 Ramsar sites of international importance, which covers 13 million hectares. And I understand that the National Wetland Conservation Fund was canceled in September. I hope that Canada will be a place that we can look forward to for groundbreaking work, for leading the charge, leading protection. I'm a little bit nervous with that decision, but I trust that there will be new ways that we can ensure that Canada thinks about peatlands and about the future of the carbon accounting and its responsibility as the host of the largest carbon stock in the world. Climate change action will be about choices, and it's also about personal change. And we can't only leave it up to researchers, policymakers, campaigners. We can make positive changes ourselves. So here are a few things that you can do. Use public transport, support renewable energy, plant trees, and make positive food choices. Eat less meat and waste less food. Making wise food choices means that you should know where your food comes from. And historically, Europe has seen some of the largest drainage in the records of peatlands dating back as far as the 18th century. Did you know that Gouda cheese emits 29 tons of CO2 per hectare per year? It's the same amount of emissions of driving a mid-sized car 145,000 kilometers. You love that Gouda cheese? Better than meat? No? Good protein alternative. 1 kilogram of Gouda cheese from the Netherlands is equivalent to produce 1 kilogram of Gouda cheese. We put in 42 kilograms of CO2. My kids like Gouda cheese. They don't like it anymore. Wise food choices, that's what it's about. Unsustainably sourced palm oil emits 60 tons of CO2 each hectare, each year. That is 300 kilometers by car every hectare, every year. Palm oil is found as an ingredient in about 50% of food products globally. But it's also some other products like soaps and shampoos. What makes the situation a little bit more complex is that palm oil is actually a more efficient source of oil than vegetable oils, some other vegetable oils. So the solution may not be to completely ban or not use products from palm oil. But maybe you should support the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil and look for these markings. So when you're shopping, keep your eye out for that RSPO symbol. Thank you. I have one more. I have one more message, but I'm not sure how to change from here to the internet.
Peatlands are crucial to fight climate change.
Thank you.
They are large, often forested swamps that can be found all over the world. They matter for the planet because they actually store twice as much carbon as all the world's forests together while covering less than 3% of the land's surface. But peatlands are being degraded and lost at a dramatic pace due to logging, drainage for agriculture, and burning. And when they are destroyed, they release massive amounts of greenhouse gases. And the unique and often endangered plants and animals that they house are lost as well. Peatlands also matter for people because smoke released from peatlands fires is toxic and has the worst impact on the most vulnerable groups, our children and the elderly. We must protect peatlands because peatlands matter.
Thanks, Alec.
Thanks for that very informative session. I think we should hang out because we both love peatlands and we work in Africa.
Yeah.
I work in the boreal peatlands, and I realize most of the initiative is currently looking at tropical peatlands. Do you have any plans for incorporating what's happening here, considering we store way more carbon than it's in the tropics?
Yes, we do. And that's such a great question because everyone that I meet says, oh, you're Canadian even, what are you doing? I have to admit, it was a little bit of a strategic decision. Maybe I shouldn't be recorded on YouTube saying this. No, because really, what we have here in the tropics is something that is locked in and under tremendous threat. There are plans to build a highway straight across that peatland. And we need to actually work with those countries that need the help. They need the capacity building. They need the legal frameworks. They need the experience to actually lock those in. But as I was saying toward the end of my presentation, there's a little glimpse into the future. We're coming up with the Peatlands and Permafrost chapter, and a lot of the awareness raising stuff, we also point to what's happening in Europe. And definitely Canada has a lot of experience and a lot of challenges. And the global north at the end of this year will be coming really strongly into the global north. A lot of great work in Mongolia, a lot of work in Russia, researchers wanting to exchange. They're working on peat fires as well. So there's already quite a really strong community, I believe, working on that area. The tropical peatlands a bit more scattered. There might be a hub in Leeds University, Liverpool, another hub in Queensland University. So connecting those researchers together has been our priority because first and foremost, our decision makers in Africa need fast access to good science. So that has been our priority. But yes, we are coming and very welcome. Thank you so much. Philippe and his team is doing great work here. And we've already been discussing on the sidelines and coffees as they're trying to keep me awake. A lot of espressos, but I love them. And we've discussed a few ideas about how we can link in together as well the great work that's happening with McMaster, Wilfred Laurier, and others. I've been tweeting and watching, and yes, come on in, and we'll be coming.
More questions? Usually, we get people very excited. Now you see a lot of pensive faces.
Yeah.
I think the message is going across.
Yeah, great talk. I was really intrigued by that idea of drainage-free livelihoods. Could you just maybe go into a little more detail about what that might look like in
Yeah,
Indonesia or
absolutely.
wherever?
So there's a new, people have been actually looking into that quite a bit in Indonesia because of the urgency of the issue. Wetlands International has a lot of work there in that growth area, as well as FAO and the Kreisfeld-Meyer Center. And they recently made a new term, Peluda Culture. Don't know if you've come across it. It's wet agriculture. I like wet agriculture. I love you guys, but I really like wet agriculture. It's accessible, people can understand it. And there are, as we said, the aguape palm in Peru is a fruit. What we're trying to do is to look into markets. What is marketable? Because at the moment, those high-end commodities are dominating decision-making. And so Peluda Culture looks at how we can, replant some of those native species. Apparently there was this nut that grew in Indonesia. And because you couldn't harvest it every year, they ripped it out. Because, apparently we need to be busy. But apparently this nut already gave the same oil production as palm oil. But someone made a decision at one time. And so we're working with scientists as well in C4, and they're looking at ways to use those peatlands. There's aquaculture. Another way you could use a peatland is actually to do high-end tourism. Ecotourism, study search, research tourism. That's something that we're looking at. But really what it is about is accessing financing and making viable that market demand, which we need. So Peluda Culture, you can look it up, and the people at Kreisfeld-Meyer Center will tell you way more. Yeah.
So thank you again.
Thanks very much for having me.
To show our appreciation, we have a little present here.
Oh, that's kind.
And so, thank you again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.